Good morning. I believe we're on 34b, and we're at the Mishnah. Okay. Ein almonan nefras minichsi yisayim ela b'shvua. So if an almona wants to collect her ksuba, then we require a shvua. Okay. In other words, if she's entitled to collect her husband's ksuba, and the concern here is that maybe she took something. She took something on behalf of her ksuba. So in other words, when she's collecting payment, she's already collected something. So therefore, we said she has to make a shvua. What happened? Nimnu milahashpia. They started to be very concerned about shvuas, and they said we don't want to make an oath. We'll see in a moment exactly what they were scared of. Whatever the reason was, making a shvua, particularly a shvua deraisa, or even if it's not a shvua deraisa, but a shvua that's treated as if it's a shvua deraisa, which was something like this shvua, is very scary. And the almana, the widow, didn't want to make such shvua. The widow stopped wanting to make such shvuas. So what they do? What was the solution? Gamliel decided. So instead of making a shvua, they would make a neder. What does this mean? It says follows. They tell the almana, look, we want you to make the following neder. If you'll say something as follows. If I've already taken something on behalf of my ksuba, I should be prohibited to eat bread or eat vegetables, something like that. Something that's extremely difficult but doable. And if indeed she took something else on behalf of her ksuba, she'll have to live a very, very difficult life. And the inheritors, they can choose which item they want for her to make a shvu on. Okay, so over here, the first item in Mishnah is something like there was a need, and to fix society, Gamliel made this decree. The Gemara gives some other examples. Witnesses sign on a divorce to be able to have the world in a more in a better way. What's the reason why do witnesses need to sign the divorce? According to Rabbi Dovid or Edim Masira Karti, so you don't need witnesses in the first place. This way she has a proof, and it's much easier for her to get married. There's a record of it, etc. Okay, and the next item is a Hillel Hiskin Pruzbul, they take an Ilam. Hillel created a document called a Pruzbul to be able to rectify a major flaw. What was the flaw? Before Shemitah, nobody would want to lend money because they were afraid it's going to come Shemitah, and they won't be able to collect. So therefore, Hillel says we're gonna make a pruzbul, and this way will allow the poor and the rich to loan each other money. Even in my area, the Mishnah begins by saying that an almana, a widow, needs to make a shvua if she wants to collect her ksuba. Truth of the matter is that everyone needs to make a shvua. What does this mean? In other words, the rule is if you're collecting from someone who died, you need to make a shvua. Why do you need to make a shvua? We'll see in the Gemara. I believe it's later in the Masechta. There are two main reasons. I believe the most common reason is because Srori Atfisa. Maybe we're concerned that he paid her with bags of cash. Hold on 1 second. But if the idea is that whatever the reason is, the point is not just the widow that collects the shvua. Everyone collects the shvua. So the Gemara says, "Almana tzrichalei." The widow. That's the most important component. Why? I would think. In other words, the fact that a creditor needs to make a shvua before collecting doesn't surprise us. Why doesn't it surprise us? Because if it's an unusual thing it's not unusual. It's very common that everyone's going to die, but people loan money. They typically don't think about the guy dying, so therefore they'll continue to lend money, and therefore the rabbis didn't feel bad to require a shvuah if the guy wants to get paid back. In other words, you're collecting from the inheritors. We don't know what happened between you and the father, so therefore go make a shvuah. However, the almana, the widow, 50% of scenarios, the widow is going to be the one to collect the ksuba, or the man, right? On the small amount they go for divorce. So therefore, because of chain, because of we don't want people to start suspecting their wives of questionable behavior. So by requiring this type of shvuah, we're sort of doing just that. Because what we're doing is we're saying, hold on, we're suspicious. Maybe you've already paid up and she's stealing money. Maybe that's inappropriate for somebody's widow. He doesn't want his widow to be suspected. If a creditor is suspected, maybe it's even better. Who cares? But for a widow to be suspected, that would be problematic. So Kamash Malone, the Mishnah is telling me that no, even a widow is also required to make a shvuah. Okay, Nimnu Milashbiyah, they stopped making shavuos. My time, and why did they stop making shavuos? The Gemara has a frightening story. Ilaim Mishum de Rav Kahana. Could be the reason is because of Rav Kahana. What was the story of Rav Kahana? The Omer of Kahana of Amrilov, Omer of Yehudah, Omer Rav. Rav Kahana, some say it was Rav Yehudah in the name of Rav. There was a story of a certain person. Hold on a second. There was a story of a certain person, B'shnei B'tzaros, and there were years of hunger. Shehifkid dinner zohav eitz almana. So there was a famine, and the guy gives a gold coin to a widow. Now, by the way, the fact that she's a widow is a sort of random detail in the story, because the fact that she's a widow doesn't seem to be an important part of the story. What she do? In gold coin, it needs to be protected. She didn't want to just keep it in her wallet; it could be stolen. So she hides it in a barrel of flour. Of course, she forgot about it. Turns out she forgot about the coin there. She took the flour, she baked it into bread. And this specific loaf of bread, remember, it's in the middle of a famine. She's a very wealthy woman. She's giving charity. She gives a loaf of bread as charity to a poor person with the coin inside the loaf of bread. Eventually, Bob al-Dinar, the owner of the coin, comes. I'd like the coin. So she says, I don't know where it is, and you should just know. Poison should enjoy one of her children. Of this woman. Now that's a euphemism. She was talking about herself. If I had any benefit from your coin, you should know I didn't steal it. I didn't have any benefit. And if I did, poison should enjoy one of my kids. The story goes, within a short period of time, one of her children dies. Okay, now this is an amazing story because she didn't have any benefit for the coin. She gave the coin to somebody else who obviously realized that she wasn't intending on giving the coin, because nobody hides coins and pieces of bread they give to poor people. When the rabbis heard about this, they said, if this is a penalty for somebody who makes an oath, with doesn't seem to be a lie, it seems to be true. Somebody who makes an oath that's a lie, certainly the penalty is much worse. Okay, so Gemara says, my time why was she penalized? Gemara says the ishtar. Okay, in other words, if she said the truth, she didn't have any benefit, which is true. She didn't have any benefit in this situation. If that's the case, why was she penalized? The Gemara says, my time from the ishtar welcome dinner, because she got the benefit. The poor person that she gave, she's very generous because she gave him a full loaf of bread, and she also gave him the space of the coin. Right? There's a small amount of space that otherwise she would have had to fill up with flour, but she benefited from it, and she didn't have to fill it up. She gave him less flour than otherwise because there was a coin in the bread. Okay. So therefore, even though technically speaking, what she said was, practically speaking, what if you think about what she meant is clearly true, but technically speaking, in the most technical sense, it could be what she said. It was actually not true, and therefore she was penalized. Okay. Umay, and what does it mean? Misha nishba be'emes, somebody who makes a shvur that's true. Kamisha, in other words, you're telling me that she gained the space of a dinner, so technically speaking, it wasn't true. So as you're right, it means kamisha nishba be'emes, as if she swore something that was true. Doesn't mean, in other words, you're right. Technically speaking, it wasn't true, but this is pretty close to as true as true gets. And therefore, it still stands as a significant warning. Okay. Okay, Samara says, my area almono, I feel the grushanami. Why are we talking about an almona, a widow? I feel the grushanami. Even a woman who's divorced is in the same category. In other words, so both a widow and a divorcee both collect ksuba. Presumably, they're both scared out of their wits from this crazy story that none of them want to make a shvua. If that's the case, then if it's the case that none of them want to make a shvua, so then why don't we to protect both of them, both the divorcee and the widow? Why don't we exempt both of them from a shvua? And instead, we should put in place the neder. Remember, the shvua is an oath. It's this scary thing because a shvua. What's a shvua, by the way? A shvua is made. You have to hold an item of a mitzvah. So you're sort of holding a sefer Torah or holding tefillin, and you're swearing by God's name. It's a pretty scary event. It's designed to be that way, so nobody should make shvuas. By the way, today we do not make a shvur deraisa. We do not allow people to make shvur deraisa. Any of this stuff, holding an item, we don't do any of it. So much so that if you will, like I mentioned this in the past, if you would have won a case had you made a shvua, in this case you actually lose the case because courts will not allow you to make a shvua. Instead, in such a scenario, we're going to make a compromise. You'll have to make some sort of payment because we will not allow you to make a shvua. Okay, now if you don't have to, if everyone's scared out of their wits to make a shvua, so what do we do? What do we substitute with a neder? To say that if I collected part of the ksuba previously, I should not be allowed to eat bread or something similar. Now, okay. 1 second. Now, if that's the case, so a divorcee is in the same category. Why are we differentiating between a divorcee and a widow? Okay, so Gemara says, Alom Omer Zera Omer Shmuel. Why do Rav Zera say in the name of Shmuel? Lo Yishanu Al Almana. Our mission that you could substitute a neder for a shvua is only true of an almana, a widow. Of a grusha mashbiin. But with regard to a divorcee, we do require her to make an oath. What's the difference? Why should there be any difference? If everyone's scared to make shvuas, so nobody should have to make a shvua. What's the difference between a divorcee and a widow? Gemara says almana shayne debay. He know the katorcha coming asmi asya the arude hetera. In other words, the truth is it's a combination of factors. It's not just an oath of something that you know to be true. It's that typically a widow, she's a widow. Her husband died. She's still in the house. We'll soon see that. As a matter of fact, she's supported by the husband as long as she's an almana. What does that mean? As long as she's not looking for another spouse. Once she starts looking for another spouse, so then she has to start supporting herself. So you can imagine she's living in the husband's house. She's eating. Her husband's estate, her deceased husband's estate is supporting her. So she might accidentally take stuff that was that she shouldn't have taken, and therefore she's very scared to make a shvua because she knows that she might actually have something that she shouldn't have had. By divorcee, that's much less, it doesn't really happen because she has to leave the house and he gets to keep everything behind. So therefore, she's not as concerned to make an oath. Omer of Yehudah, Omer of Yomi Barabba. Rabbi Yehudah says the name of Rabbi Yomi Barabba. Rav and Shmuel Amit Shavayo. Both Rav and Shmuel said, Lo yishanu el bezdin. Avachutz lebezdin must be an isa. It's only inside court. Inside court, we require her to make an oath in God's name and to hold a Sefer Torah while she's doing it. In that situation, 1 second. In that situation, the kids are not allowed to require her to make a shvuah. However, if they find her outside of court, meaning if they want to make her make a shvuah outside of court, this is not a severe shvuah; it's a much more minor shvuah. So then it's permissible; they're allowed to require her to make a shvuah. Avachutz lebezin mashmina, so they can require a shvuah. The Gemara asks, "Any v'arav le'magvik subel armelosa." Okay, in Rav's time, during Rav's time, for some reason they did not like the idea of the neder. 1 second. And the reason why they didn't like the idea of the neder was because nobody was keeping the Durham. There was a general leniency people had in the Durham. So there was no obstacle. So Rav had a major problem here. The women don't want to make a shvuah, but they don't want to, but a neder is not going to work either because nobody's keeping the Durham at that point in time. So Rav stopped collecting ksubas for an almana, for a widow. Widows were not able to collect the ksuba. The Gemara says, hold on a second, we have a simple solution. Let them make a shvuah outside of Bezdin. You're telling me that the children can make a shvuah outside of Bezdin. So you have a simple solution of how they can enforce the collection of a ksuba. So the Gemara says, 1 second. Gemara says, Kasha, you're right, it's difficult. The Surah Mastahachi, but Ardah Mastahachi. That was the version of the Gemara that they quoted in Surah. In Ardah, they had a slightly different version. This was the version. Amar of Yehudah, Amar Shmuel. Yehudah says the name of Shmuel. Lo yishanu el bezdin. This is only true in a court. Outside of the court, the children could require the woman to make a shvuah, even after the takana, the enactment of Rabbi Gamliel. The Rav says, and Rav says, no, you cannot require her to make a shvuah even outside the court. And this makes sense, Rav, according to his own opinion. Rav Tamei, the Rav also. Because Rav would not require a shvuah outside of Bezdin, so Rav was not able to collect the ksuba from an almana, a widow, and therefore he stopped collecting ksubas from widows. Remember, because again, they stopped. They were very lenient in the Durham. They stopped really keeping the laws of the Durham, and therefore there was no way to make sure that indeed the woman was able to, that the woman was actually able to collect her full ksuba and not really stealing something else. So the Gemara says, so I already said this to you, so now the Gemara brings it out. The Gemara says, hold on, why is Rav not collecting from the Adra? Let her make an eder. Let her make an eder, let her collect. The Gemara says, B'shnei the Rav, Kili Nidri. In the years of Rav, people were very lenient with the Durham. And therefore, Rav did not want to make them violate an eder. So Rav sort of said, okay, no more Nidarim. And therefore, no more collecting of ksuba. Okay. Interesting story here. A few stories here. Relevant right on the subject. There was a woman who came in front of Rav Huna. Amar Allah, so Rav Huna says, look, I understand you're a widow, you'd like to collect your ksuba, but Rav is the rabbi here, and I can't really help you. Rav is not letting us collect the ksuba. So Amrlei, so she says to him, Midi hutaima el damana kitam midi miksuvasa. Because why is Rav concerned? Because maybe during the couple of years I was in the house, I took something that didn't belong to me and I kept it as mine. It belonged to my husband, which is now the estate's not mine. And therefore the woman was concerned that she says, you're concerned that maybe I took something. I swear by God's name. If I took anything for my ksuba. So what did she do? She went ahead and she made a shavua anyway. It wasn't prompted by the court. She just did it of her own accord. So Amar Rav Huna says, hold on a second. If she's going to jump along and swear by God's name that she's serious, so Rav would agree in that situation that we would collect the ksuba. Okay, this one's it's pretty scary. I also write on subject. The Rabba Bar Rav Huna. There was a woman, presumably a widow. She comes in front of Rabbi Rav Huna and she wants to collect a ksuba. Amar Loi says to her, hold on, my avid luck, what can I do for you? The Rav Loi Mag ksuba. Rav is not collecting ksuba anymore for a widow. And not only that, it's not just Rav. The Abamori Loi Mag ksuba. And Abamori is also not collecting ksuba for a widow. Hold on, I didn't collect my ksuba until now, and I was entitled to for food, for support. So fine, you don't want to give me ksuba, fine, just give me support. He says, no more support for you. You don't get support either. The Amar of Yehudah, Amar Shmuel, because it's true that until now you got support, but Yehudah, Amar Shmuel says, in the ksuba, in the document your husband signed, what does it say? It says, you get mezainis, which roughly speaking means, you stay in my house, you enjoy my assets until you become, as long as you're a widow. What does it mean to be a widow? It means not to look for another partner. Right now, for another partner, when you start collecting your ksuba. So you went and you demanded your ksuba in court, or Yehudah Amar Shmuel says, no more mezainis, you're no longer considered a widow. Second. Anyway, as you might imagine, okay, as you might imagine, this woman was not happy to be the wick that was burnt from both ends. Right? They said in one end, we're not giving you ksuba because we can't. And the other end, you demanded your ksuba, no more support. So she was quite mad. So what did she tell him? So she says to him, Afchul Kursei, flip over your chair, the chair of Rabbi Rav Huna. Kibei Trey, obviously. You're going with two different opinions to make me lose out everything. Now, Afchul Kursei means to flip over the chair, but what it really means is a curse. Now, Rav Huna was concerned because, in a certain sense, she was right. Rav Huna was giving her the brunt of a legal argument. So Rav Huna decided to actually fulfill her curse. So Hefchul Kursei. Rav Huna was concerned about the fact that she cursed him, and he flipped over his chair literally, and he sat on a flipped over chair. And he tried to explain to her his reasoning. But despite that, her curse still had effect. If he was still cursed, perhaps he became ill. Connected means he became ill, or the curse was weakened. Okay. But regardless, he was cursed, and the fact that he flipped over his chair did not have an impact. Rav Yehudah says to Rav Yomi Gittin, if you want to collect the ksuba, here's a solution. Adra bebezdin, require her to make a neder inside of court, and make her swear outside of court. And go bring the reporters. And make sure every ear hears this, because I want people to know that this is how you collect the ksuba of a widow. In other words, make a neder in court, make a shvua outside of court. Gufa, the original Gemara. Amar of Zera, Amar Shmuel. Zera says the name. Shmuel lo shanu el almana. Alva grusha mashpia naisa. So in almana, we exempt her with a neder. A grusha, divorcee, we require her to make a shvuah. So the Gemara says, "Grusha de adraloi." What happens if a grusha wants to make a neder? We don't accommodate that. Hold on a second. We've gotten a message from Israel. A certain woman, she received a divorce from a certain man whose name was Achabar Hadaya. The Miskari Aye Mori. This man also had a name of Ayamori. The Nodra of Asr Perish of Olamala. And she accepted a neder of not to eat fruit. If the like Kabila thing Savasa al Galufkarachad V'Sefer V'Sefer Iyaf. Umimshalas Bluam. So in other words, she agrees with the neder that if it's true that she did not receive from her divorce except for a book of Eiv, job, Tehillim, Psalms, a couple of worn out clothes, and a coat, then she should be prohibited forever from eating fruit. And what was the value of these items? We said it was worth 5 coins, 5% of the ksuba out of 100 coins. When you get this document, collect the remaining 95 coins. We see clearly here she's a divorcee, and yet she's making an eder. Ravashi, no. This story, Ahu get Yivam and Hava. This story is a story of a divorce of a Yivam. What does this mean? Her husband died. She's without children. She's eligible for Yibam. One of the brothers gave her a divorce, and then eventually they all did Chalitza. She's entitled to collect her ksuba from her deceased husband, her original deceased husband, since no one did Yibam. But the truth, and therefore she's in the category of a widow and not in the category of a divorcee. But a divorcee has to make a regular shvuah. Okay, let's begin the next Gemara. So Gamliel says that they should make a neder. The Gemara wants to know, when do you make a neder? It must be that she did not remarry. Aval nissus, but if she remarried, and she, in other words, she was widowed, she got remarried, and now she wants to come back and collect her suba. Ein madirino, so you cannot make her neder. Make a neder. Why not? My time at the may for labal, because her husband will nullify the neder, so she won't have the impact of the neder. So Gemara says, this is my time at the may for labal. If she's married, why can't she make a neder? Because maybe the husband will nullify it. Gemara says, hold on, if she's not married, also we have the problem. When she gets married, if she gets married, then her husband will also nullify the neder. So she'll stop eating fruits for a year. She'll find a suitable partner. She'll get married, and then her husband will nullify the neder. Gemara says, no, that's not going to work because ein habal made for b'kaidman. The baal can only nullify nedarim that she made while they were still married. But if they were not married, then he can't nullify the neder. So Gemara says, okay, hold on. So you solve the husband's problem. Maybe you should go to a rabbi who will retroactively invalidate the whole neder. Gemara says, Kasavar, he holds tzarech lefaredes a neder. This opinion holds that when you go to a rabbi to nullify the neder, you have to tell the rabbi all the specifics. And the rabbi will hear the specifics that this neder was made on behalf of collecting the ksuba, and he'll refuse to nullify it. Rav Nachman says, afilu nitzis, even if they get married, she could still. One second here. One second. Afilu nitzis, even if they get married, she could still make a neder. So the Gemara says, nitzis valid made for labal. The husband is gonna nullify the neder. So what's the purpose of her making a neder if there's no teeth to it? because the husband will nullify it and she can violate the neder the next day. Gemara says the madrina lo barabim. We require her to make the neder publicly, and that type of neder the husband cannot nullify. Mason. Gemara asks Nisis if she gets married, gavik subasa, im not gavik subasa im nodra. If she made a neder, she can collect her ksuba. My love, what's the scenario? Nodra hashta, meaning she got married, and then now she can make an neder. And you see here clearly that she can make an neder while she's married. This is the question on the first opinion. On Rav Huna says that once if she gets married, she can't make an neder. So it says, "Loy the nodra mikara." We're talking about she makes an neder before she gets married. In other words, she makes an neder, she collects the ksuba, then she gets married, and that's acceptable. The Gemara says, hold on a second. Vatani, the Bryce is very specific. The Bryce says, Nisis, if she gets married, then noideres v'gavik subasa. She makes an neder while she's still married. So clearly, this is not like the opinion of Rav Huna. Rav Huna says you cannot make an neder while you're married because the husband will just nullify the neder. But Nachman says you could because you make the neder publicly, so you can't nullify it. Neder should b'ravim yeshlei hafara. There is opinion that says that a neder that's made publicly could be nullified. And there is opinion that says it cannot be nullified. Okay. Now, therefore, the debate between Rav Huna and Rav Nachman is as follows. Rav Nachman saying you can make the neder publicly and then the husband can't nullify it. And Rav Huna says, no, it's not going to make a difference. Because even if you make the neder and then even if a married woman makes a neder publicly, the husband could still nullify it because this is an old age machlekes. And therefore, you're right. There is a brisa that goes like you, but there's a brisa that goes like me. And it's a long-standing debate whether or not a neder can be made publicly, and that would not allow the husband to nullify it. 1 second. The Gemara has a question. Tzarech l'fared as a neder or ain't it tzarech? Do you need to specify the type of neder or not? But Nachman Amar ain't it tzarech. Or Papa Amar tzarech. One second. Okay. When you go to a rabbi, do you need to specify the circumstance surrounding the initiation of the neder or not? With Nachman Amar, Nachman says, ain't it tzarech? It's not necessary. In other words, when you go to a rabbi, you tell the rabbi the neder, and you don't specify the circumstances. We'll explain why in a moment. Papa Amar tzarech, Papa says you do need to specify the circumstance. With Nachman Amar, ain't it tzarech? Nachman says you don't need to. Di Amar tzarech, because if you're going to require the specification of the neder when you tell the rabbi, Zimnin. The guy is person might misrepresent right. This is it's a narrative. The story around the neder is a narrative, and every narrative is portrayed in the context of the one who perceives the narrative, not a factual statement. So therefore, he might actually misinterpret the narrative, and that's why the rabbi will give him permission. It's better not to mention the narrative at all. It's the rabbi's responsibility to ask the questions. Papa says tzarech, it's necessary mishamilza the isura, because and the reason why it's necessary to give over the circumstances is because of milsa the isura, meaning like our Mishnah, which is a scenario where the woman is trying to collect her ksuba, and in order to do so they require her to make an eder. So here, it's very important that we know the context, because without the context, then it could be the rabbi will end up permitting a neder that actually should never have been permitted, because this neder was in the context of allowing her to lie about collecting her ksuba. In other words, she didn't want to make a shvuah, so we let her make a neder, and it turns out, well, actually, she can no longer eat fruits because it turns out she actually did take something from her ksuba. So because of this, we must require a neder. We must require a neder. One second. We must require a neder when the we must require you to specify the circumstances of the neder when you request a rabbi to release the neder. Okay.